Hello, welcome back to the Focus Lounge. I'm Jan Brown. I've been waiting for a while to talk about this topic because it's not your usual manifestation conversation. It's about love, and love is deeply personal. It's specific. No two people experience it exactly the same way, and no two relationships teach us exactly the same lessons. Over the years, I've found myself looking back at different relationships and asking these questions. What did I learn from this? What did this mean for me? What did it mean for him? What was I actually looking for at the time? I've always been fascinated by the human condition, why we choose who we choose, why some relationships feel effortless while others feel impossible, why we stay, why we leave. And perhaps most importantly, what we're really searching for underneath all of it. What I've discovered over time is that many of us spend years trying to find what we want without fully understanding what we're actually looking for. Sometimes we're searching for love, sometimes it's safety, sometimes it's validation, sometimes we're trying to heal old wounds by assigning people roles they were never meant to play. When you clear away enough of the debris, you begin seeing people more clearly. You stop seeing red flags as pink flags. You stop trying to create sequels to stories that already told you how they end. And you begin understanding yourself in a way that brings an incredible amount of peace. Because at the end of the day, I think what most people want is surprisingly simple. Not drama or emotional roller coasters, or sunshine one day, thunderstorms the next. I think most of us are looking for something that feels easy, fun, peaceful, passionate, a place where both people can rest, where both people can feel valued, where life just feels better together than apart. And if we're talking about deliberate creation, then surely love belongs in the conversation because it's not easy, but it's one of the most revealing mirrors we'll ever encounter. So today, I'd like to tell you a story about two people who loved each other deeply and how that love evolved over the years. This is the parable of the unlikely two. There once was a man and a woman. The woman was captivating. She was warm, charming, ambitious, thoughtful, and full of life. People enjoyed being around her because she had a way of making them feel important. She listened when they talked. She laughed easily. She dreamed out loud. She could spend an afternoon talking about life's biggest questions and then spend the evening laughing herself silly over something ridiculous. The man noticed all of it. He admired her elegance, her vision, and the way she moved through the world with both confidence and curiosity. She possessed the qualities he respected and a kind of presence that stayed with him long after she had left the room. The woman was equally fascinated by the man. He had swagger, street smarts, confidence, an undeniable magnetism. Friends admired him. People listened when he spoke. He wasn't afraid of life, and he wasn't afraid of telling the truth, even when the truth made people uncomfortable. To the woman, that was intoxicating. Her previous experience with love had left her questioning whether people really meant what they said. This man was different. He felt solid, dependable, direct, the kind of person who would tell you exactly where you stood. She trusted him. More importantly, she believed him. The man had carried feelings for the woman for years. Somewhere along the way, no other woman quite measured up to her. As fate would have it, they were now in an era of their lives where they were both single and free to move towards each other. The woman found herself looking at a man who seemed to answer a question she had carried for years. He loved her openly, fiercely, and devotedly, the kind of love she had hoped always existed. The man found himself looking at a woman who saw something in him that even he didn't always see in himself. She believed in him. She respected him. She saw possibilities for his life that stretched beyond his current circumstances, and he loved that. Together, they felt as though they had found the key to a lock that each had been carrying for a very long time. What happened next was no surprise. They fell truly, madly, deeply, devotedly in love. They moved in together almost immediately. It was everything they'd hoped for. The simplest moments felt special. Running errands, cooking dinner, falling asleep on the couch. Even the boring stuff felt fun because they were doing it together. When they were apart, they called each other. Neither wanted the other out of sight for very long because being together felt better than being apart. They enjoyed each other's company. They felt safe together. They trusted one another. Quiet evenings and ordinary moments were special because they continued to fall in love. It was plain to see. Friends and family knew their loyalty to one another. For a time, life felt exactly the way they thought it would. Then, a new chapter arrived. The move to a new location felt like a fresh start for both of them. The woman arrived without knowing exactly what came next, but opportunities seemed to appear quickly. She found a great job, gained confidence, and began imagining an even bigger future than before. The experience was very different for the man. He found himself working far from home. He was spending time away missing her, but also navigating circumstances that forced him to take a hard look at his future. The experience changed him in ways that happen when someone spends enough time questioning where they've been, where they're going, and whether the life they've always known can continue carrying them forward. While he was away, he wrote to the woman constantly. The letters were filled with love, desire, and anticipation. By the time the man returned, she thought she knew exactly what was waiting on the other side of that reunion. The woman missed him so much while he was away. She expected the loneliness to end when he came home. Instead, it was just the beginning. The man who stood in front of her still loved her. The tenderness in his eyes when he looked at her was still there. The problem was that he seemed consumed by something she couldn't see. He felt far. The man spent long stretches thinking, resting, and trying to make sense of what came next. The distance she wanted to bridge wasn't where the man was focused. He was trying to reinvent himself. The love had not disappeared, but something had definitely changed. As the years passed, the love between them remained intact, even as some of the cracks beneath it continued to widen. So when the man asked the woman to marry him, she wasn't surprised. The proposal felt sincere because it was sincere. The man wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't trying to save the relationship. All was well in his eyes. He was asking the woman he loved to continue building a life with him because, in his mind, that had always been the plan. The woman loved him enough that saying yes felt natural. What caught her off guard was her reaction to it. She expected to feel happier, to be relieved. Instead, the loneliness she had been carrying was still there. The distance she felt between them was still there. The growing awareness that she was receiving whatever energy remained after life had taken its share was still there. She found herself wondering whether this was simply how their life together was always going to feel. The thought saddened her because she loved the man deeply. The proposal had confirmed something she had never really doubted. He loved her. What it hadn't answered was whether they could find their way back to each other. She still said yes, because love, hope, and commitment were all still present. And at that point, she still believed that somewhere ahead of them, they would recover the closeness they once shared. Over time, the loneliness changed shape. At first, she thought She missed the romance they once enjoyed. What eventually realized was that she was missing something deeper. She was missing participation. The woman wanted to share her life with the man she loved. She wanted to share the experience of being alive and feel that the things that mattered to her mattered to him, that the person she was becoming remained interesting to him, that he was still curious about her inner world in the same way that she remained curious about his. Instead, she increasingly found herself reaching toward him with things that mattered deeply to her, only to discover he had no energy left to receive them. She understood why. That was part of the problem. She understood how hard he worked. She understood the pressure he carried and the exhaustion. What she couldn't understand was why there was never enough left over for her. Gradually, she stopped feeling unseen as a partner. She started feeling unseen as a person. The man still loved her. She knew that. What she no longer felt was his interest in her. And for a woman who had spent her entire life growing, dreaming, creating, and imagining, that loss cut deeper than either of them realized. As the years passed, life settled into something neither of them expected. His work was physically demanding. The money rarely felt sufficient, and the future often seemed to arrive carrying another problem that needed solving. He was tired in a way that went beyond sore muscles or long days. He was tired of carrying the load, tired of wondering when it would get easier, tired of feeling trapped inside a cycle that demanded more effort every year while offering very little relief in return. The woman understood this. When she caught glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with, the explanation seemed obvious. He was tired, life was hard, and he was carrying more than most people knew. The distance wasn't intentional, it was exhaustion. At least that's what she told herself, and for a long time she believed it. There were still good times, festivals and vacations, celebrations with friends, long drives, ordinary weekends, moments when the responsibilities of daily life seemed to loosen their grip for a little while. During those moments, she would sometimes catch a glimpse of the man she remembered, the animated, funny, charismatic guy who could talk for hours. Then the conversation would come easier. The affection would feel more natural. The distance would seem to disappear, if only for a little while. Those moments mattered. They reminded her why she fell in love with him. More importantly, they gave her hope. Perhaps the version of the relationship she missed wasn't gone. Perhaps it had simply been buried beneath years of responsibility and exhaustion. So she waited. She understood. She gave grace. And for a long time she believed the distance was temporary. The problem was that the good moments never lasted. Eventually life would settle back into its familiar rhythm. The responsibilities, his perennial exhaustion, everything that had been playing out would continue to play out over years. But she also noticed that when friends called with plans or a project captured his attention, energy seemed to appear from somewhere. That was the part she struggled to understand. What was once experienced as empathy slowly became longing, and what began as longing eventually became pursuit. She found herself chasing something that had once arrived naturally. His attention, his love. To the woman, she was reaching for the closeness they once shared. To the man, she could no longer be the center of a world he himself wasn't sure he was in. Trying to figure out his life amidst the daily grind, the increasingly experienced life as a series of responsibilities demanding time and attention. The woman was not just the person he loved, she had also become one more place where he felt he was falling short. He loved her, but he increasingly wanted relief from the unspoken pressure he seemed to feel whenever he realized he could not give her what she needed. The more she reached for reassurance, the more pressure the man felt. The more pressure he felt, the more he withdrew. The more he withdrew, the more she reached. Neither person intended to create the pattern, but both became caught inside it. When they first fell in love, the woman had been in love with her own life. She trusted herself. She pursued what excited her. She enjoyed her own company. The man had fallen in love with that part of her too. Over time, however, the woman slowly began placing more of her attention on the relationship and less on herself. Her dreams moved to the background. Her interests became less important. Much of her energy became devoted to supporting the life they were building together. The woman never stopped dreaming. What changed was how much room those dreams occupied. Every year, they seemed to move a little farther down the list. The relationship, the household, the pets, the bills, life constantly needed attention. And because she loved him, she willingly gave it. At first, she assumed it was temporary. Instead, the season became the climate. Somewhere along the way, she became extremely good at maintaining a life she wasn't that interested in living. One afternoon, she'd written a song and couldn't wait to share it with him. When he came home, she excitedly asked if he wanted to hear it. He told her he had spent the drive home listening to music and didn't want to hear anything else. The exchange lasted only a moment. The feeling stayed much longer. It wasn't about the song. It was about realizing how much she missed being seen. Then one day, an opportunity appeared that felt connected to the version of herself she had almost forgotten. It wasn't even the opportunity itself that excited her. It was what it represented. The possibility that her dreams might still be on the horizon. For the first time in a long time, she felt genuinely alive. When she shared that excitement with the man, she hoped he might feel some version of what she was feeling. Instead, she heard skepticism and doubt, which had become a familiar response from him. The opportunity exposed something that had been quietly growing for years. She felt like her responsibilities were welcome, but her excitement was not. The relationship had not become overtly hostile, but slowly poisonous. It had become smaller than she'd imagined for them, and so had her life. When the opportunity to move into a house appeared, the woman embraced it with more hope than she realized. By then, she had tried so many other things: date nights, vacations, outings, patience. None of them accomplished their purpose. She spent years looking for a path back to the connection they once shared. The more she looked, the farther away he seemed. The house became the final lever she knew how to pull. She wouldn't have worked so hard to build that future if she had stopped loving him. Part of her hoped a new environment might help reignite their early days and maybe reclaim some of the love that had flowed so freely in the beginning. At first she was excited. New beginnings, after all. Instead, the move revealed something she had been avoiding for years. The new environment energized the man almost immediately. His friends were nearby. The people and activities he loved were more accessible than ever. He looked forward to spending time with them and building a life around the things that brought him joy. It simply wasn't directed toward her anymore. The woman watched him come alive around the people and things that mattered to him. That was the heartbreak of it. The version of the man she had spent years missing was still there. She could see it whenever he was surrounded by the people, activities, and interests he loved. The energy, enthusiasm, and curiosity was still there. The realization that she occupied a smaller place in all of it was also still there. The environment was different. The relationship was not. People commented that she didn't seem happy in the new house. She knew they were right. Sitting outside one day, she found herself thinking, I should be happy, but I don't really feel anything. The truth was, she already understood what the house was revealing. She had spent years trying to reconnect with a man who seemed to be moving farther away. The house had simply been her final attempt to prove herself wrong. The realization carried a weight it had never carried before. Earlier in the relationship, hope had always provided another explanation, another circumstance, another future version of life where things might somehow feel different. But the house had removed those possibilities. For years, she had been trying to recover a version of the relationship she missed. Now she was being asked a different question. Could she build the rest of her life around this version of the relationship? She was depleted from the physical move, but also from the emotional weight of carrying hope for years that never showed any promise of arriving. The stakes suddenly felt much higher. Staying no longer meant waiting for something to return. It meant finally accepting that it probably wouldn't. There were no more levers to pull. The short time in the house had already given the woman her answer. She just wasn't ready to accept it yet. Like she had done so many times before, she kept trying, but something had changed. The anxiety she had been carrying for years was becoming harder to ignore. It had crossed from mental to physical symptoms. The tightness in her stomach, being restless in sleep. She could feel the effects of trying to solve a problem she could not solve on her own. The realization had become impossible to ignore. The man had been there all those years, but not really. While she had spent years trying to find them again, he had spent years trying to find himself. Neither was wrong, but they were no longer searching for the same thing. The last night they would spend under the same roof was not unusual. It looked remarkably similar to many other nights that had come before it. The man was out with friends. The woman was alone with her thoughts. The difference was that this time she could no longer tolerate the familiar pattern. She was no longer interested in repeating a scenario whose ending she already knew too well. All of it stood in such stark contrast to the hope and excitement she had felt when they first arrived. The house had been her final attempt. Now she knew. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the woman packed what she needed and drove away from their new home, or perhaps more accurately, his new home. She would rather be lonely on her own than lonely with the man she loved beside her. Slowly the woman rebuilt her life and reclaimed the parts of herself she had set aside for far too long. She poured energy into her own dreams, her own happiness, and the life she wanted to create. As time passed, the woman began noticing something unexpected. The love she had spent years searching for began appearing everywhere. First in the hope that life could be good again, then in the loyalty of her friends, in the support of her family, in the affection of her animals, in the satisfaction of building a life that felt authentic to her. Most importantly, in the relationship she finally developed with herself. As she reflected on the years she had spent longing for the man, she understood something she had never fully seen before. The woman would always love the man for who she knew him to be. Nothing about the ending erased what they had shared. For years she had searched for him inside the relationship. She had searched for the man she remembered, the man who looked at her with admiration, curiosity, excitement, and devotion. What she eventually realized was that the search traced somewhere deeper. It led back to herself. When they first fell in love, the woman had been deeply connected to her own dreams, her own joy, and her own sense of possibility. The man had seen those qualities in her clearly. He reflected them back to her through his love. Through his eyes, she felt seen in her full potential. She felt admired, appreciated, and deeply loved. Somewhere along the way, she had mistaken the reflection for the source. The man had never been the source of what she was seeking. He had simply reflected back a woman she had temporarily lost sight of. Now she had found her again. The years after the relationship taught her self-trust. She learned to honor what she knew instead of arguing with it. She stopped measuring her worth by how much attention, affection, or enthusiasm another person was willing to provide. She stopped searching for herself in someone else's eyes, and for the first time in her life, she felt honestly complete within herself. One day, years later, the phone rang. The man was on the other end of the line. The conversation was easy, familiar, warm. For a moment, the woman remembered exactly why she had fallen in love with him all those years ago. He was still the man she remembered. As the conversation continued, the man spoke openly about the role she had played in his life, the ways she had supported him, the ways she had loved him, the impact she had made. The woman listened, and as she listened, something unexpected happened. She realized she wasn't hearing an invitation back to the past. She was hearing confirmation that what they had shared had been real. The love, the devotion, and the importance of the relationship had all been real. She appreciated what they had without needing it to become something more. She no longer wanted to rescue the relationship. She no longer wanted to recover the past. She no longer needed the man to become someone different. The years had given her something she once believed the relationship would provide: peace. The call ended. The understanding remained. And for the first time in many years, there was nothing left to solve. The woman still wanted to be loved fiercely, devotedly, forever. Some desires never leave us. What changed was her understanding of where that love had to begin. For years she believed she was searching for it in another person. What she eventually discovered was that the deepest form of that love had never been missing. It had been waiting for her within herself. The relationship taught her many things. It taught her about love, commitment, loyalty, grace, patience. It taught her how easy it is to lose yourself while trying to hold on to someone you love, and how difficult it can be to recognize that loss while you're living inside of it. The woman would always love the man for who she knew him to be. Love was no longer something she needed another person to provide. It had become part of who she was. Her peace no longer depended on what another person chose to give or withhold. It lived within her. And once she gained her peace, anything outside of it had to earn its keep. That is the story of the unlikely two.